We acknowledge the first Australians as the traditional custodians of the continent, whose culture is the oldest living culture in human history. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and we respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. They share the memories, traditions and hopes of the traditional ancestors with the new generations today and in the future. We would also like to thank them for looking after this land for thousands of years.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to SciFest 2023 with our Careers in STEM panel. So we're very excited to have our speakers with us today. And what we are really about for this session is to think about the kinds of things that you're interested and passionate in your everyday and how you can develop careers in there. There are lots of different opportunities and the things that you are interested that can continue with you throughout your whole life. Now, I'm just waiting for one of our presenters to come through as a panelist. So just bear with me. I just might have to try to update them from their attendee list. So apologies there. Oh, I think they're coming through now. So while we're waiting for the panelists to come through, my name's Karen from Australian Environmental Education. I am also the Director of Virtual Excursions Australia, which is why you've been seeing my name pop up all over SciFest. So one of the things that I'll be talking about at the end of the session is my journey in science as well. But I can see that we've got Kresen now with us, so I'm going to hand over directly to him. He is the Manager of Veterinary Science at Sydney Zoo. So it's very, very exciting. And we are having Sydney Zoo talking about innovations in animal care at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So maybe you'll be able to get inspired. Here we go. I'll hand over to you now.
Hi, everyone. Good to meet everyone. And thank you for having me here today. So I thought I'll give you just a little bit of a rundown of my career and how I've ended up where I am today. A lot of people here, I'm a zoo and wildlife vet, and people get interested to know, oh, how do you become that? How do you get into that field? And there's lots of different avenues and ways to get into it. So I'm the manager of veterinary services here at Sydney Zoo. We have quite a large collection of animals, quite a few different taxonomic groups, from your lions, your tigers, your elephants, to all your wonderful native Australian marsupials that we house as well. And as the veterinarian at the zoo, it is sort of my responsibility to make sure we're looking after the health and welfare of all these animals within our care. So we develop preventative health programs where we actually do vaccinations for some animals. We do health checks. So I'm actually sitting in our clinic, and we've got a theater table, we've got an X-ray machine, we've got ultrasound, we've got lots of things that you'll actually hear about and see in your normal medical doctor practice that you'd go to. So the same way that domestic animals, your cats and dogs, are looked after, we apply a lot of those principles to the animals under our care at the zoos. And we also get involved with a lot of research. So we look at research that has a conservation initiative and education as well. So we host students who are looking to become veterinarians, as well as final year veterinarians who are doing placements in order to get experience so that they can be more prepared when they enter this field. The zoo and wildlife industry is quite a niche industry. It does take many years to get involved in it and become familiar with everything and get the experience needed. So how I started on this journey is that I'm a veterinarian who grew up in South Africa. So I was born in South Africa. So I was fortunate to get a lot of experience with wildlife of African mammals, which is quite interesting. And so you study a veterinary degree. So it was a 7-year course. So it sounds like a long haul, but it's definitely worth it. It's something that you can look at doing. And now you can do an undergrad and a postgrad. And it could be in the region of 6 to 7 years. That's sort of what you're looking at. And it's definitely something worthwhile, which we inspire people to do. If you have a passion for it, if you have a love for animals, there's, no end to what you can achieve with this sort of career. So I studied for 7 years, ended up working in a mixed animal practice where I worked with a lot of livestock, with cats and dogs, with horses, with exotic animals. And then I started getting into the zoo and wildlife industry as well. So I've been a zoo and wildlife vet now for about 8 years. And over the years, I've got an experience with all your different bird species, your fish species as well. We do work on reptiles, so snakes. We often get asked the question, oh, what's your most exciting animal to anesthetize or to do surgery on? And there's so many that we get to work on that it's hard to choose one. One day we might be doing anesthetic on a rhino, and the next day we might be doing one on a fish. And that's where the variety keeps you going. It's a really interesting field that that I love. I've had a passion from it from my whole life. I think from the time I was 3 years old, I've always wanted to be a vet. And so that's something that, if you have any questions, that's sort of where I am and where we are. And we're just looking at doing more research and linking up with other conservation bodies so that we can push those initiatives as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that information. We've got a question from Zara. Are there any animals that you're afraid of?
So, what I'd like to say is you have a healthy respect for certain species. We work with quite a few dangerous species, so animals that can, pose a risk to human safety. For instance, a few days ago, we did an anesthetic on an orangutan. They're large, great apes. They're really smart, really majestic animals to work with, but we have to be aware of their size and their strength. And we take those things into precaution. We work with venomous snakes. We work with alligator snapping turtles. Those are things that can be quite dangerous, but we have protocols and procedures in place. So over the years, I've been fortunate to get experience with quite a few of these animals. We've done anesthetics on lions, and it gets your heart racing. It certainly does that, but it's sort of something where you have respect of them, and you use the science. There's a lot of evidence-based work on the anesthetic protocols that we use these days. So it's always a safe procedure.
Excellent, thank you. And another question is, how many animals have you worked on? I imagine a lot.
Ooh, that's a tough one. So I've worked through, so in 8 years, it's in the thousands. It'd be hard to say, because we work with fish as well and birds, and an aquarium can have 2,000 fish. So we've worked with all of those. Just at the zoo that I'm at now, if you count fish as well, we've got over 4,000 animals. So yeah, we've worked. You get a healthy respect for them, but there's been quite a few that we've gotten to work with. And there's obviously some memorable ones, like your mega herbivores, and Australian natives. Your marsupials are such a unique species of animals here, and they're really interesting to work with.
Excellent. We've got another question is, what is the weirdest animal that you've worked with? I imagine fish must be really challenging, but that might not be the weirdest.
It's I actually had a few slides so fish are actually quite challenging, and it's a growing area of science. I mean, a lot of these things we learn to be based on, there's a lot of human studies, a lot of work done on cats and dogs and all your production animals. And then zoo animals is a new sector, and we sort of start, seeing how we can do these things. So a common question people ask is, can you do surgery on a fish? Yes, you can. You actually can anesthetize a fish. We do it quite commonly. So fish will breathe through their gills. That's where they get their oxygen from. They filter it through, they get it through the water. So you can actually add an anesthetic agent to the water, which can make a fish go to sleep. And we actually can monitor the level of anesthesia, and then we can remove them from the water. And we often have them on a little cradle, which is nice and soaked and it's moist. And what we also do is we use a pump, and we pump that anesthetic water over their mouth and through their gills, so you can actually keep the fish under anesthetic. I mean, there's a few things like salamanders and a few of the reptiles. There's definitely interesting things that we get to work with every day. Yeah, there's no one that sticks out, but fish are definitely something that we enjoy working with. We've got sharks here as well. So we've got bull sharks, and they can be an interesting species to work with. Can be dangerous, but again, we've got protocols to make sure we do it as safe as possible.
Wow, that's just amazing. I think, Sydney Zoo's got such a huge variety of animals, and with the aquarium and the sharks, as well as, a lot of, as you said, the big herbivores and the native animals. So, not to mention the big carnivores. And another question that's come through is, have you ever been hurt by an animal?
So I wouldn't be lying if I say I don't have some scars. This happens. We used to have to do a lot of work with antelope and large animals, which can kick out and you can get injured. So I do have a few, lucky nothing, or touch wood, nothing life-threatening, but you have some cuts and scratches. And if you're working with birds and small cats as well, you're always going to have cuts and scratches and little bites in your hand. But there's definitely ways we can do things safely. But yeah, I have had a few minor bites and scratches along the journey.
Wow. Is there an animal that you haven't worked with that you would like to?
So I would definitely like to do a bit more work on marine mammals. So dolphins and whales. That's something, I had the opportunity to work with sea turtles, and we've done penguins, and we've done seals as well, sea lions. But I haven't had a chance to work with a lot of dolphins or marine mammals. So that's something that I am keen on. I've gotten to work with bears, but there aren't many bears in the region. So that's something I would love to go to Alaska and work with Kodiak and brown bears and all of those in the wild. That would be something that's quite a unique experience.
Fabulous. Another question is, do you have exotic birds at the zoo?
So we don't have too many birds at the zoo at the moment. We've got 3 female ostrich, common ostrich. Ostrich can get quite big, so they wouldn't be native to Australia, so they would be considered exotic. And our girls are in the region between 90 and 100 kgs, so ostrich can be pretty large birds. We've got a southern cassowary, and we've also got emu, and then the penguins. We've got little fairy penguins as well, a little colony of them.
Oh, lovely. Another question from Laurie. Have you ever had to bring an animal back to life?
So it's something that you train for, and definitely resuscitation and emergencies are really important. So I started off in mixed practice where I was working with cats and dogs, and we'd often have dogs coming in that unfortunately were poisoned or hit by cars or had severe trauma. And a lot of them you do have to resuscitate and bring back. Sometimes you do C-sections on animals, and we have to revive the puppies, to make sure that they're viable. We've had cases where, you can get a small antelope species that has been abandoned by the mother, and they can be quite weak, and you get in there quickly, you resuscitate them, you give them, usually it's about providing fluids, glucose, those initial things. And we do sometimes have, there's, any anesthesia carries a risk. That's why we take all of that into the picture, whether it's worth the risk of anesthetizing an animal. So we have these measures in place. We sort of train routinely on resuscitation. And because of the species, the variety is so big, there's so many different ways of resuscitating animals. For instance, a fish is a good example. How are you going to give mouth-to-mouth to a fish? How are you going to be working with a fish? And fish, you can put in pure oxygen into the water to saturate the water as well. And you can pump water over the gills. Sharks, we've had to, actually get in there and move them back and forth to stimulate the movement over the gills. But yeah, there have been cases where we've had to do that.
Wow, that's incredible. And yeah, certainly having to sort of physically move a shark around must be certainly a challenge. We've got Zara's asking your favorite animal as a child.
As a child. So I did grow up with dogs. It was my family had dogs, my brothers, we had dogs. So I sort of grew up with dogs. I love dogs. People say, oh, you're a cat and dog person. And then I started working with cats, and I'm like, oh, I actually like cats too. And then I like birds, and I like horses, and I liked a lot of animals. So I think that's why I became a zoo vet. I ended up liking quite a lot of species. I don't have an animal that I wouldn't want to work with. You definitely have big cats, and because I grew up in South Africa, A lot of the herbivores and carnivores from South Africa have a close spot to my heart. But I'm certainly falling in love with your koalas and macropods on this end.
Well, it's easy to fall in love with the crazy marsupials that we have here in Australia. And we've just got one last question here. Have you ever had to operate on one of your own pets?
So thankfully not. It's something, where you usually would try not to do that. You sort of we call it a conflict of interest, and just excluding yourself from that situation. I haven't had to do that. Often I've had a snake. I have kept snakes before, so I've had to treat them before, but I haven't had to do a surgery on one of my own pets. I was quite young back then, so I wouldn't have been allowed to do those surgeries, but I have. So that's how I got into the field. Like I used to go and volunteer at vets from the time I could. Any vet was willing to take me. So I've had taken my dogs through when I was, not qualified as a vet as yet, but I was able to assist in the procedures. So I have seen my own pets under anesthesia. And it is something that's a bit different. You're so attached to them and there's a bit of worry, but it's you learn to be objective as you work with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nellie has got a little bit of a question about sort of medication and the anesthetic is, based on different animals, but also the question is, can you use certain anesthetic on different animals, or is it really specific to a type of animal?
So there's definitely, there's, as you start learning about pharmacology, the study of these medications and how they work in the body, there's quite a few classes of drugs, and they all have similar effects. And we use balanced anesthetics in quite a few different species. You can use, for example, a gas anesthetic, so something called isoflurane. We can use it on quite a variety of species. I've used it, for instance, in the last 2 weeks. Today I used it on a swamp wallaby, to maintain the anesthetic. And 2 weeks ago or a week ago, I used the same thing on an orangutan, to maintain the anesthetic. And then to induce them, so sometimes you need to give them an injection to make sure they go to sleep, so that you're able to work on them. We can use, a lot of the drugs can be used in different animals. What comes with experience and with the science is the dosages and which ones you can combine and which ones work better in some species and which don't in others. But yeah, there's definitely drugs that we don't have one anesthetic that does every animal. And we certainly have quite a few which can cover quite a few species as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today and all of those amazing questions from our participants as well. Absolutely fabulous to have you here. We've got to move on to our next panelist. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And excellent. And Oksana from ANSTO. For those of you that were with us, you might have seen our ANSTO in their element session on Monday. So Oksana works with radioisotopes at ANSTO and is very soon going to be a nuclear reactor operator, which is extremely exciting, and I can't wait to hear about that. So welcome, Oksana, and please share your experiences with us today.
Cool. I've just got like a little PowerPoint. It's a bit easier to sort of talk towards how things are going. Is that all good if I share?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Cool. So you guys see that?
Yep, that's coming through.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. So I'm at ANSTO, and that does stand for the Australian Nuclear Science Technology Organisation. And I'm currently doing the graduate program, and that's just a 2-year sort of program. And my background is chemistry. So this is my little cohort. So this is my cohort. So every 2 years, ANSTO, and I guess like a whole bunch of other organizations, they like to take in sort of graduates who are normally fresh from uni. And in that photo, the middle person is our CEO, who's pretty much the boss of the work that we do at ANSTO. And in the graduate program, there's a whole sort of wide range of people in STEM. We've got some engineers in all sort of fields. And then we've got our physicists, we got our biologists, we've got our chemists. And as sort of a cohort, every 6 months, we get to go around a different sort of business unit at ANSTO. Because at ANSTO, even though it's sort of one company there's about 1,000 scientists and engineers on site. And so everyone's doing really different sort of work. And so I've had the pleasure of joining the radioisotope team. And I guess what that sort of entails is that, I don't know if anyone's sort of seen a periodic table of elements before. This is just essentially what everything that you see is made up from. You know, you've got your metals, you've got, you know, your gases, and anything that you can think about that you can see, it's definitely in this periodic table of elements. And most of the time, things aren't really radioactive. But what happens is that there is some ways of making those elements that you just saw into a radioactive form. And the cool thing about radiation, it's not just what you see in movies and, you know, what you hear about, I guess, nuclear reactor meltdowns and nuclear bombs. I know there's that new movie about Oppenheimer, but in the radioisotope team, we're actually trying to use these very specific radioisotopes for things such as medicine, or as a way of, I guess, tracing environmental pollutants. And these are just some of an example of what we sort of work with. So I guess more specifically, I'm working with a terbium isotope. And what's terbium? That's just a metal. Terbium is just a metal like iron and steel. And the way you make it is that you get the non-radioactive form, just a normal metal. You put it into the nuclear reactor. And once it comes out to the nuclear reactor, about 10% of it becomes radioactive. And I guess my job, what I've been working on is how do you separate the radioactive terbium-161 from the non-radioactive? And that's just a whole bunch of sort of chemistry separations that, essentially puts me in the lab for the whole day in using different sort of mixtures of, water and chemicals to try and separate that terbium-161. And I guess why is that cool? Because if I can separate that radioactive metal, then I can give it to a person who can attach it to a drug. And very specifically, this is being used to treat prostate cancer. Cancer can be treated with chemotherapy and external radiation therapy, but in sort of this case, if you can put this terbium-161 on a drug that will then go to the cancer, you're helping sort of use that radiation to kill something that is causing someone to be sick. And so, I find that really special that I get to work on that. And I guess the other one that I sort of highlighted is mercury-203. Mercury-203 is used for environmental stuff. Everyone hears about mercury and it being really bad. And, we want to help the environmental business unit by giving them something that's radioactive so that they can track exactly where the mercury goes. Because, if you pick up dirt, there's probably so much random stuff in it. You want to know where's the specific mercury. If we can make it radioactive for them, then it's just a lot easier to sort of track. So that's exactly what I've been doing. And like mentioned, in about 2 weeks, I'll be going up to the reactor for 6 months to figure out how do you irradiate metals. And so I guess how I got here, I went to a local public school, Stratford Girls. And then when I started doing my HSC, I had about 2 routes. I got accepted into the army. And then, I guess in year 12, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I was sort of physical, but I didn't really count myself as someone who, I guess, was smart, or I guess, in my head, a stereotypical person that went to uni was sort of not the category that I fit into. Like, I knew I was really excited about science and all that stuff, but I didn't really think that I wanted to go to uni. I was keen for the army. But then when I got my sort of marks back and, I didn't get over 90, but I still got into uni, and I thought, well, I guess the army can wait and I'll just see how uni is, and maybe I'll like uni. And I guess a couple of my teachers encouraged me to go, and I ended up going, and obviously that was a very good decision for me, and I'm quite happy. So I ended up going to uni. And what did I do at uni? I went to UTS. I actually did a biology degree first, because I thought I really liked bio. But I guess the thing about university is, and I guess in general life, is as you do things, you might start to like something else. And so as I was doing biology, I ended up turning to chemistry because I liked, I guess, how interesting and fun it was. And during my uni sort of degree, I did some internships, which I think were really important. I did one up in Newcastle with CSIRO. They're another really big government research place. I was doing some cool things with mirrors and solar power, and that was really fun. And, you know, these internships are always running. Every summer at uni, you just find out what's being advertised and you just go for it, and eventually one will land. And as well as CSIRO, I actually got an ANSTO internship during my uni degree. So that's probably how I got this job right now. And that was all to do with mining chemistry, and that was really, really cool. And those are the 4 other interns that I worked with. And yeah, both of those experiences were super great. And I guess those are probably things that, I guess, to summarize of like how I got to where I am. The main thing was just following my interests. Yeah, I really liked biology, but I found chemistry more interesting. And so, yeah, it wasn't really up for a discussion, even though, you know, you don't really know what you do. If you follow your passion, you'll find yourself in something cool like a nuclear reactor. I guess the other cool thing is like mentors, people that sort of invest in you. I definitely wouldn't get to where I am without the help of others. But I think sometimes people or teachers or parents or whatever can try and offer you help, and maybe we're sort of a bit too stubborn to listen. But yeah, people are more willing to help you than you sort of think. And then the other thing that I could never talk more about is just internships. Like, obviously you guys are in school now and it's a bit different, but I guess as you get older, those things will sort of help you to meet people and see things that you never really thought about it, even something like this. You know, you can see people that work in nuclear or at the zoo, or, you know, in like, you know, all these other things. And I think that's really cool that you guys have that and just keep taking any opportunity that comes. And yeah, I guess that's what I'm doing and how I got here. I'll stop sharing. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That journey is incredible to end up at a nuclear reactor. So Zara's got a couple of questions. One, what is the meaning of radioactive?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Radioactive, so when you have something that you've got your normal stable things, right? And so they're just sort of materials that are just happy to be where they are. You know, do you know when you're just happy, you just sort of sit there and things are going pretty good? But radioactivity is when you add something extra to a metal, like I showed you that periodic table. When you add some extra energy into it, it starts becoming a bit more unstable. And when something becomes a bit more unstable, it starts fidgeting, it starts getting really, starts moving a lot more. And in order for it to relax, it needs to emit energy. So you got an unstable element that wants to relax, and the only way to relax, you know, like when we're sort of also got too much energy, we want to release energy. And that release of energy is what radiation is. And then that radiation can be detected using some really cool machines. And I guess the other side of it is that that energy can also be used to, I guess, kill things, right? You can use it to kill cancer, or you can use it to even kill healthy tissue. So that's why you got to use radiation in a very protective manner. And that energy can be used for power, like reactors.
Fabulous. And Zara also was wondering, did you find chemistry hard, or was it one of those things that you just clicks with you?
It was probably the hardest thing ever. I think in year 11, I had no idea what was going on the entire time, but I knew it was interesting, right? Like, I think that's the thing with science. Like, I found it interesting, but like, it was never easy, right? Like, I'll look at that periodic table and I'm like, what am I looking at? But I think I followed my interest more than what I was good at. Like, I was good at sport, which obviously a lot of people go down normally what they're good at. And I think that's cool. Like, you know, some people just, they're good at something because they like it.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess I sort of really like science, and I decided to sort of put a bit more effort into it. And a lot of teachers and a lot of, I guess, people at uni helped build my skill base up. So yeah, it didn't come naturally, but I loved it way too much to give it up.
Well, that's good. Sometimes, it is about actually putting the effort in to achieve your goal as well. And Nellie was wondering, when you're in the lab, are you isolated, or do you get to engage with other people, or do you find that you sort of just focus doing one thing?
Well, I guess in a lab, they're normally quite, like, our labs are pretty big, right? So there'll always be more than just me. Like, there's quite a few people doing different things. And I guess, is it isolating? I guess maybe that's when personality comes into it. Like, I like going in there and sort of doing my work, but there's so many other times to sort of interact with people. And there are people always around you anyway. So like, if I'm waiting for something, there will be someone next to me anyway. And so you sort of chat to them. And like, the nature of my work, because it's radioactive and a bit more dangerous, you always need someone with you. But yeah, there's more people than what you think, but some sort of like being a bit more closed off than others. I like when there's people around me, but I'll probably just get a bit more work done.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. We need to move on to Tiah now from Geoscience Australia. So thank you so much for sharing all of that information, Oksana. It was fabulous to have you here. If you can stick around, there are a couple more questions that we can ask you at the end.
All right. Hello, everybody. So I'm Tiah. I work at Geoscience Australia. So basically what we are here at Geoscience Australia is a bunch of people who love rocks, love looking at rocks, love talking about rocks, and we all get to do that for a job. My particular job is in science communication about geoscience. So that's my role, is communicating what our scientists do here to people such as schools, farmers, different government organizations. Anyone who's interested will communicate that to. And how I got into geology was, I'm going to backtrack all the way to when I was 3 years old, is when I started this journey. I didn't know it at the time though. I was living in Vanuatu, so one of the Pacific Islands close to Australia. And it is one of the most active volcanology areas in the world. So it's on what we'd call the Ring of Fire, which is the big Pacific plate. It's going under different plates and creating this ring of volcanoes around the area. So I fell in love with geology because every few weeks you would hear about a volcano, you'd feel an earthquake, you could explore the natural world around you, and I just absolutely loved it. I didn't know that it was called geology at the time though. I just called it outside, but I couldn't get enough. And then I had to come back to Australia for high school, and I had this fantastic teacher, and she really opened my eyes to the fact that there even was geology. When I thought about science, I thought about the classic three. I thought about chemistry, biology, which Oksana did a bit of both with there, and physics. That's what I thought a scientist was, that you were inside and you were doing one of those three things in a lab or at a computer. And so I was just absolutely rapt when I figured out that science could be so much more than only inside, and being outside, you can be a scientist as well. So off I went. I decided that's what I was going to do. So grade 9, I had already figured out that that's what I wanted to do at university, and off I went after that. Much like Oksana, it didn't necessarily come easily to me, but it was something that it was worth the struggle to learn. So if there are things that were confusing and I didn't get straight away, I treated it like a puzzle rather than a brick wall. And I actually enjoyed unraveling it and working it out for myself and figuring out how the natural world around me came to be. So the undergraduate degree is basically a bachelor's degree, which is 3 years, and then I did an honours year after that, which takes it to a 4-year degree. And then I worked for a little bit of time at a university, where I helped run all the field trips. If you haven't got the common theme yet, I love being outside. So I quite enjoyed that job. I got to do a lot of week-long field trips, taking students around and showing them different rocky outcrops, so where the rock is on the surface, and teaching them about how that formed. I then went on to study a Master of Science Communication, so taking my love for geology and I guess sharing it with the world. I wanted to learn how to do that a bit better. So I did that at ANU. That's a 2-year program. So it's once you've done your bachelor's, you can enroll in what's called postgraduate studies. And then I came here to Geoscience Australia, where I feel very fortunate to be, and I quite enjoy it here. But Gav, if I had to give any advice onto if you're interested in doing something in STEM, is align it with your interests. So look at what you like doing in your normal day-to-day life and what passions are sort of coming about when you learn about different parts of science and how that can align with what you're already interested in. Because if you love what you're doing, then it's a good challenge, not a frustrating challenge, I suppose. That's not to say there aren't frustrations with everything, but it's worth it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tiah. And I completely agree with you. My passion for rocks and geology started when I was 4. So I was one of those people that could not go outside without ending up with a pocket full of rocks.
Yeah, I'd love to know how many people here have their own little rock collection too.
Probably quite a lot of the children and probably the adults
know.
probably have at least one rock or shell that they've kept with them for some time. But we've got a question here from Zara about whether studying geology can help find ways to lessen volcanoes, but maybe to understand the impact of volcanoes.
Definitely geohazards is a big part of geology. So understanding what hazards are in what areas of the world, and also understanding if that volcano were to erupt, where it's going to influence. So you have things like tsunamis can come from big earthquakes, which are associated also with volcanoes. You can have landslides, obviously lava. Yeah, so does that answer your question? I'll try and get it.
We'll see if any others come through, but what I'm really liking that we're hearing is this common thread of things that interest you when you are young, can continue on with some hard work into this journey. And you've ended up at Geoscience Australia, which has to be the mecca for geology and geology communicators in Australia. So, and the same with Oksana ending up at ANSTO, and Kresen ending up at Sydney Zoo with such a wide variety of both exotic and Australian animals. Like, these are amazing not endpoints, but amazing points on the journey of your careers. And yes, that does answer Zara's question. She says thank you. And we've got Joe here. Where is the best place you've been as a geologist?
Oh, well, that's a tough one, Joe. I think the best place that I've been as a geologist is probably the Flinders Ranges in South Australia. It is an absolutely stunning and rugged landscape, and very, very confusing. But gosh, it was a fun puzzle to try work out. It had every rock type that you had there. You had your sedimentary, your metamorphic, your igneous. It was so folded and faulted, so it had something for everybody. It was just a natural, many, many kilometre wide puzzle to solve. So it's wonderful. And I guess touching on that's the reason I love geology. It is history that you can touch, and it takes in every part of science. So we sort of collect all the other sciences, like biology, we've got fossils, chemistry, all of our minerals are made up of different atoms and elements and all arranged in their very particular crystal structures. It's a tasting board of science and applied to the world.
That's a fabulous explanation of geology, and Flinders Ranges is on my bucket list. I haven't made it there yet.
Recommend.
We've got one more question here. Is what's the biggest struggle in your job?
Ooh. Biggest struggle in my job is if someone were to ask what my favorite rock is. It changes every day.
And I wonder if our other speakers, Oksana and Kresen, have the same problem when you get asked what's your favorite animal, or do you have a favorite element? So that must be the same puzzle as do you have a favorite rock? Well, you know, it's not a bad puzzle, and it is one of those things, as you said, it probably changes all the time depending on what you're working on and what you're looking at. Excellent. Thank you so much, Tiah, for joining us. We are going to move on to Renee, who is our final speaker. So Renee, thank you so much for joining us. You are a PhD student from the Centre of Astrophysics and Supercomputing at Swinburne University, Melbourne. That is a lot to get through. So please feel free to talk us about what you do and your journey to where you are at this point in your career.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you're right, that title is an absolute mouthful, and we just usually abbreviate it to CAS or CAS, so the Centre for Astrophysics and Supercomputing. And I'm in my last year of a PhD, which means that I've gone on and done 5 extra years of study after my undergraduate in science. And my specialty at the moment is looking for very, very small black holes in our outer galaxy. And we're interested in finding if these black holes exist to potentially rule out their status as a candidate for dark matter. And dark matter is this interesting substance that makes up 85% of our universe, the matter in our universe, and it acts as a cosmic glue. So it helps glue together structures like galaxies and clusters of galaxies. And no matter what we do as an astrophysics community, and no matter how many detectors we build or how many science experiments we perform, we're still unable to completely determine what dark matter actually is, although we know it's there. So that's part of my research work, is working with data from millions of stars in a distant star field outside of our galaxy. And we monitor these stars for nights on end, and we just sit there waiting to see signals of intervening black holes that might obscure or focus or warp the background light from stars. So my day-to-day work is sat at a desk, and I access all these terabytes of data on our supercomputer at Swinburne, which is a huge computer housed in its own separate level of a different building. And it allows me to access the data quite quickly and manipulate it and do statistics on it to try and find these interesting signals. Some of the things that I've found have been really cool types of variable stars. We see a lot of distant stars have solar flares like our own sun does, which will help us learn more about. So I'm watching the Q&A come through at the moment, and I've just seen Emmanuel say, I love black holes. I love black holes too. Yeah, so solar flares, I see very close orbiting stars, so close that actually one of the orbiting companion is pulling apart the other star. And we have one favored potential black hole or planet signal that we're going through the process at the moment to try and figure out what that is. Some other special parts of my job include being part of some Australian-wide collaborations to search for dark matter, using a whole host of new detectors, using particle and nuclear physics, and using astrophysics as well, which has allowed me to actually visit different places on Earth. We have these huge collaborations in astrophysics that often span many countries and have hundreds of people working on the same science goal. So within the Australian dark matter community, it allows funding for our students, including myself, to go visit places like France and Italy and Geneva, to go visit CERN, where they have the Large Hadron Collider deep underground, and learn about their techniques and their science and sort of swap ideas and expertise. So that's a huge perk of the astrophysics community and doing research, is the ability to travel. Yeah, what I sort of did to get to this stage was realize very early on that I loved space. Like, you know, when you're in primary school and they often split up your units of learning across the year, and maybe one term you learn just about space and science, and then another term might be meteorology or weather science. The space stuff I loved. I frothed it, learning about planets, learning about the galaxy, even learning about potentially extraterrestrial life. It was just so amazing to me. So I sort of continued that passion along through high school and realized that it was definitely something that I wanted to study. So I did a bachelor's of science. I majored in physics. We didn't have to major in astronomy, but we did have astrophysics and astronomy subjects at my university, which I took and loved, and they were my favorite subjects. And then after that, I applied to do honors, where I signed on to the project that I'm still currently doing in my honors year, and started the work towards building our results and our conclusions. Yes, so I think I'll take some questions now. That's all good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got some questions. So Zara wants to know, have you ever been to space and would you want to go?
No, I've never been to space. You have to be incredibly amazing, fit, trained, everything to go to space. So these astronauts they send to space are people who have been working towards that role for several years. And it's a very rigorous training program that I don't really want to be a part of, because it's not my major interest to go to space. I much prefer to stay on ground. I like Earth. It's a very nice, comfortable environment, and space can be quite hostile for humans because we are built for Earth. We thrive on Earth, and in space, in lower or changed gravity conditions, it can be a little bit difficult to acclimatize.
Excellent. We've got, what is the theory of a wormhole?
Theory of a wormhole. Oh, okay. Now, I'm going to say that this is not my expertise. My expertise is in finding very small black holes and maybe not understanding the physics and the cosmology, as we call it, around black holes. But I believe that the theory of a wormhole is that you can somehow fold space, potentially through a black hole, and end up in a different area of space. And many people think that actually inside a black hole, you can transport yourself to a different location. Yeah.
Apologies there. We have another question here. It's probably not relevant because we would have heard if you discovered any life forms, but how many black holes have you found?
So yes, you're right. We haven't discovered any other life forms as we know it. There are lots and lots of research groups within Australia as well. We have a group called SETI, for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, who look towards different planets. We call them exoplanets, so planets outside of our own solar system, and try to monitor their atmosphere to see if there are the building blocks for life, like oxygen and water. There's some, cool research out there at the moment, but no compelling, great, yes, we found ET. How many black holes have I discovered? None, not so far, but we are in the process of finalizing our results, finalizing our, investigation into our data, and publishing a paper that will have those conclusions in the next coming months.
That is very exciting. Well, I might ask everyone to join back in. I'm going to add everyone as a spotlight. So I know that we did have some questions earlier that we weren't able to get to as well. So if there are any questions for any of our speakers, please put them through to the Q&A. But I really just want to remind everyone out there that the things that you love now are the things that you can study through school, through university, and get a job and a career in them. There are so many varieties of roles that there are in science. Science communication as well. So as Tiah was saying, I am also a science communicator. My passion was rocks and the marine world. And I learned to scuba dive when I was at high school. I went to uni and did lots of earth science subjects, geology, paleontology, and I worked at a museum for 20 years at being a communicator of their amazing collections. So that was an amazing job to be able to work so closely with science and share their research and outputs with members of the public. So doesn't matter what you love. We had scientific illustrators for people that loved art, were able to recreate those amazing animals and reconstruct them to share those as well. So there's so many things. So we've got the question here, would these jobs be your dream job? Is there anywhere aspirational that you want to go next? Because of course, with people's careers, it's a journey. So it's never an end point at this So let's go around the table there. What about you, Renee? What's your dream job?
I think my dream job would be working with some of the upcoming telescopes and survey programs that are coming online in the next couple of years. And these telescopes will see the most detailed, in-depth analysis of our local neighborhood around our galaxy, but in like unprecedented download rates. And it's just so cool to know that we can see so much of space around us. And that's what I'm hoping to get to.
That sounds amazing. What about you, Kresen? Are you in your dream job, or is there another one in the future?
Always feel fortunate, being able to work with, all the amazing species on this planet. So that's one of the dreams that I've managed to realize, with a lot of support along the journey. But sort of, I've always had this idea in my head where I would love to go and travel the world and live a year in a different country and then just do conservation work. So I think that's where you learn about a community, their interests and the animals, and learn how everyone works with nature and how nature is important to the whole community. So it's something from the time I was a kid and after I grew up and after I qualified, I was like, oh, that would be probably really unrealistic, something that's very difficult to achieve, but it's something where, maybe in the future I get to travel a bit more and do a month, working with a certain species that needs help in the wild. That's definitely something that I'd aspire towards.
That sounds amazing. What about you, Tiah?
I think my dream job would be back a few hundred years as one of the first mappers. How the geologists used to just go out on horseback, big pad of paper, and just map by hand. But unfortunately, a lot of that work's already been done. So unless someone can build me a time machine, looking at you guys at ANSTO, I feel like you guys have the expertise there. That job's no longer available. Maybe a dream job would be combining scuba diving and mapping. Get really detailed bathymetry mapping to the centimeter scale.
Well, there's certainly a lot of the oceans still need to be explored. So there we go.
I'm not sure how good I'd be at 4 kilometers depth in the ocean, but I'll give it a red hot go. I don't think my open water license is quite to that depth.
No, it definitely won't get you quite that deep.
My 24 meters isn't enough.
Maybe you need a time machine to go further forward till we've got new technologies.
Okay, I found the new dream job. Somehow build a time machine to get me the dream jobs.
That sounds amazing. Oksana.
Yeah, definitely. I think the nuclear world is very exciting. So I think at the moment it is my dream job. Maybe in the future, I don't know, because in Australia we can't use nuclear power as an energy source. So if I can be trained up here in our research reactor, it'd be really cool to go overseas and see some sort of more power reactors and see if I can get my hands in that control room if I had to pick something.
Fabulous. And Emmanuel, he said he's currently working on a time machine. So he'll be able to help you out with that one. And Nellie, Oksana also wants to know, what is the average half-life of some of the isotopes you work with?
Oh, very good question.
On the spot.
So the terbium that I'm working with, a lot of medicine isotopes, they have a half-life of 6 days. That's a very good biological half-life. Another one is, I'm going to say it's 20 hours. So it's like very radioactive because in 20 hours, half of it has decayed. So that one sets off all of our sensors. But the mercury one is, I think it's 60 days. So that one's a bit longer. So yeah, they all vary. But then uranium that's used in the reactor, that's like millions of years or something.
Wow. And we've got one of our final question here is going to be for Renee. Do you believe there are other life forms out there?
I mean, sure. I mean, if we look at our own star, the sun, and see how many planets are orbiting around the sun, and one of those planets has life on it, and then we look to the billions, the hundreds of billions of stars just in our galaxy, it would be strange of us to think that we're alone, and also really sad to think that we're alone, that somehow we're so special that there's nothing else like us or close to us out there in the galaxies and clusters of galaxies beyond. So I'm hopeful that we'll find life there.
Excellent. And again, if this is something you're interested in, there are plenty of different roles that you can do. Study biology, study astrophysics, and all of these things. You could be the person in 30 years' time that discovers a life form on another planet. Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for giving your time and your experiences and being able to share that with us. Lots of great questions from our students as well. Lots of thank yous coming through as well. So I really appreciate your time. And just remember, it's the passions that you have today that can be your career in the future. So just remember, sometimes you've got to work hard. But you will get there in the end. And it was great to have such a diversity of people sharing their experiences. And hopefully you feel inspired to get the textbook out, do a little bit more research, a bit more study, and continue all the way through to university and beyond. So thank you very much, everyone. I look forward to seeing you for future sessions for SciFest, and a big thank you to Inspiring Australia for supporting SciFest and enabling us to all be here with you today. See you later, everyone. This National Science Week project is supported by the Australian Government and proudly brought to you by Virtual Excursions Australia.